Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Randy Bach. I'm the president of the Newton Taxpayers Association. I'm presidential. And today's January 22nd, 2024, and I'm honored to have with us today Robert Fizek, who is an architect in Newton and long-term resident. And I think I, at one point, sort of coached one of his kids in soccer, so I know he's a parent, apparently. And we're going to be talking about zoning development within Newton, and I kind of have to squeeze in a little bit of a slight preface. I'm going to steal some of Robert's time, and I apologize in advance. And as I speak, to talk slightly about the Newton's taxpayers, talk about the Newton educators, the teachers' strike ongoing this instant. I just got off the phone with parents of teachers, not of kids, but parents of some of the teachers in our fair city. And we love our teachers. They love their kids. And they were kind of surprised to hear my take on the matter. I'm going to try to encapsulate it pretty briefly because I've discussed it in other episodes and I want to get to Robert. Over the last few years, school population has decreased by 14%. If this were a company like Apple or Facebook or whatever, and their population, their user base went down 14% in a couple of years, heads would roll. Not in a good way. People would be fired and they'd have to come up with a different business model. Here, we don't do that. Here, we're theoretically going to give people raises. And without going too far into it, you might have heard of this thing called COVID. Newton had one of the longest closures. People basically voted with their feet, they voted with their wallets, they voted with their students, their kids, to take them out of Newton schools. So it's not as if the Newton population decreased by 14%, just the student population. And so not on top of paying for free schools by paying taxes and whatnot, so it's a sunk cost, they spent extra to either homeschool, Catholic school, religious school, private school, their kids, or move, in one way or another to get them out, boarding school or so forth. So they're taking on extra costs just to stay away from Newton schools, and they have not come back. And part of the reason they haven't come back is, originally they left because of COVID, but I think part of the reason they didn't come back is because the schools have not fulfilled the school-ness of the proposition, of their part of the bargain. School test scores have gone down over time. Obviously, there's some social aspects now added to the mix because of their prolonged absence from COVID. But generally speaking, Newton, which had been in the 1960s and the 70s the #1 school system in the state based on test scores, is kind of just average for this type of town. It's better than Brockton, it's better than Quincy and so forth, but compared to Lexington, Weston, Wayland, basically the west suburban area, we are rather mediocre and declining, relatively speaking. And mind you, while we're spending more and more of our budget, we're up to like 65% of the Newton tax base paid towards that. So I apologize that my feeling is that probably the educators, the Newton Teachers Association, feels if they can get away with it. They are probably the biggest single, as a group. Teachers unions are the single biggest contributor to Democrat candidates, and we have a Democratic governor, Democratic mayor, although it's nonpartisan here, and obviously all the state reps and so forth are for the most part Democrats. I don't think there's a Democrat city councilor, and so maybe they feel as if they have sympathetic ears in one form or another on the opposite side of the bargaining table. But as taxpayers, I think we have to really look at the whole situation and what's best for our city long term. And we did not see a 14% decline in the number of teachers, even though we have had a 14% decline in students. So I think people have to start there. And for all the teachers, extra demands about social, basically ancillary social support staff. So I just, posited on Facebook whether they're willing to accept that and no increase in their own salaries. I doubt I imagine that's a non-starter. Anyway, so I apologize for the diatribe, but I thought we'd get it out of the way because this is a news item. And that being said, I'd like to segue to our guest and talk really more about Newton things on your mind. So tell us, what are the things that animate you in your thoughts about the positives and how to make Newton a better place?
Sure. Thanks, Randy. I think if we're kind of just reflecting a little bit on the past year and what was quite a rigorous debate on how Newton was going to rezone or redesign its zoning. There was a pretty intense argument going on for folks who were on the so-called progressive angle, that we must build more housing. We would love affordability. I think all of us would love better affordability, but those things are largely out of our control locally. And we're being encouraged and then forced by the state to go along with their formulaic MBTA Communities Act, which really, if you look back on it, is based on research and data that's now, in some cases, almost 10 years old. The formula and the whole proposition was based on commuting from the suburbs into the center city, something that COVID blew up, making the whole paradigm obsolete. And here we are, still marching down the road that was determined.
Those are the orders.
Those were the orders. And it's extraordinary preemptive legislation where, here in Massachusetts, we make fun of all those other states, Texas and wherever, that do preemptive legislation that tell localities what they can and can't do. And, I guess it's okay here now?
Yeah, I'm just going to interject slightly because I have a pun in my head, and
Okay.
I just have to. I haven't taken enough medication to fix this, but I'm thinking that for part of the train system is the T, right? And if we think back some hundreds of years ago, there was the Boston Tea Party, and the whole essence of that was regarding taxation without representation. So basically, the rules and orders were made in Britain, which was a couple months away by boat back and forth, and the orders would come over slowly and so forth. And they'd have some order, and naturally it'd be out of date by the time it went back and forth across the ocean, if it made it back. And so you wouldn't have this immediacy that we have today, theoretically. But people nonetheless were being taxed heavily. And then their dictates were regal and from far away, and people who knew nothing about the area. So they had the Boston Tea Party. They threw the tea over the side because they didn't want to pay extra fees and taxes and tariffs on that. But the irony here is we have the Boston Tea, which is the tea with a little circle around it, and that's the transit system, and the MBTA as well. So we can make my pun, the Boston Tea Party. We are basically having the same kind of edicts. In this case, it's from central Boston, federal Boston, the state apparatus, dictating what the cities should do. When we have our own zoning, and we are basically getting, I'd have to think of a good way of rhyming taxation without representation, but maybe you could do that. But that's, I think, akin to the theme of what you're speaking of. Am I right?
Yeah, on a broader, on the broader policy level, on the state into localities, that's what we're dealing with. This has been coming at us for a while. Our mayor signed us up for this proposition. I believe when she was the head on it was a Mass Municipal, perhaps. So this was kind of baked into the cake. We had city councilors, particularly Councilor Crosley, who was very gung-ho on this proposition. And this movement that's going across the country for density, transit-oriented development. There's nothing wrong with the concept, but it's a concept.
Exactly.
And it hasn't been proven out yet. It hasn't done what it was promised to do.
Yeah, people
In
get
some
very
cases,
frustrated when the people don't conform to their theories.
Yeah, and they tend to ignore contrary evidence or lack of evidence.
And then they wonder about populism. That the voters are angry. H.L. Mencken, about 100 years ago, said that democracy is the principle under which the people vote for what they want, and they deserve to get it, good and hard. Sometimes our officials are not necessarily as responsive. They tend to be retributory. Once they're in power, they think they're, in a sense, that regal representation of King George III, if I'm not mistaken. So how did that play out in Newton in our last election, say, and what do you think the forces were at play, and have people learned anything from those?
Yeah, well, again, being a primarily, let's say progressive dominated politics of Newton, and there being a lot of, frankly, a lot of media attention on this subject that is both driven by both social how do I say it, social agenda and politics are always involved, and money, because certainly there are big money interests involved in development, which has come down to the residential level, even private home sales in Newton. I believe it's somewhere between 20-25% of the sales are to corporate, or not.
Oh, really? That much?
Not private transactions, but more business oriented.
Of residential.
Residential. Well,
what's the concept? Is this one of these renting out things, kind of like the Uberization? I mean, where you become kind of a vehicle, your house is a vehicle for some bigger corporation kind of thing?
Perhaps there may be.
Or are these just people who are making LLCs for themselves before they buy their own house?
There may be some of that, but there's a lot of development. We see the tear downs. So these are purchases made with cash because there's deep pockets chasing out folks who might want to buy a more affordable home. They can't compete. You try to find a fixer-upper.
So what do you think the motivation is for those, say, corporate homeowners? I mean, that's making the assumption that we are underpriced, or that there is a profit based on kind of annealing and agglomerating some of the houses into bigger things, kind of like turning us into Brighton, or Alston.
Well, I think a lot of it's more at the higher end of the market. So you take down a reasonably.
Okay, fair enough. So you're not talking about Brighton as much as, say, making us more like Weston or whatever, as having bigger houses at higher rates. So they, I mean, you got to give humans credit. I mean, people are not going to really do very much without some profit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
very significant
if I didn't get paid the big bucks, I wouldn't be here today. and you got your check for being here, I assume.
You think you said it was coming.
Yeah. So, but aside from our philanthropic work in talking today to each other and hopefully to a few other people out there, most people will do things, because there's a profit, and that's how humans are geared, which is pretty good, because I'm not going to go build a building for somebody else and spend my time potentially kill myself without having some thing in it for my family and whatnot down the road. And our life expectancy is such that we decline. We want to collect some money so we can feel safe. So I think that's fine. So what's your proposal? I mean, what's the problem such as you see it, and what are the fixes?
Sure. Well, we don't really understand the problem very well, so that does contribute to our not understanding what the fixes might be, because we depend on a lot on the marketplace just to kind of dictate what's happening, what's going to happen, and then we haven't, at least in my opinion, in Newton, done a serious planning for this was village-centered zoning, but it was not done in a very particular way, working with the community to determine what do we think is appropriate for this village, that village, this context, that context, and then dictate those into our zoning, to which the market will respond accordingly. So if you zone for much larger development, those properties become much more valuable, and that contributes to this kind of upscaling across the board.
It's a little bit, excuse me for being naive potentially, but a little bit like toothpaste. I mean, you have a tube of toothpaste and you can squeeze in one part, it gets big in the other. What I mean by this is that there are places, zoning tends to it's kind of squeezing the toothpaste in one place, so you're going to get more growth in one, the place where you allow the growth. And if you just allow it on Main Street, you're going to get the growth on Main Street. you don't allow it 2 blocks in, it's going to be circulated there. If you change the zoning all of a sudden, then people who bet big on Main Street, theoretically they could have purchased cheaper 3, 4 blocks away. So the zoning has to be kind of a solid thing for developers to want and feel comfortable doing their stuff, because they don't want to like waste their money paying a premium to be on, you know, this prototypical Broadway or Main Street, and then it turns out, oh my God, some other guy comes along, gets such a deal 2 blocks away, he's building the same house based on land that he bought for a quarter of the price. So, you know, I've come up with this concept called the covenant, or a covenant, which you know, basically is like a homeowner's pact, HOA. And so Newton doesn't have one, but the people who come in to buy into the Garden City, and I bought here, you know, in 1999, when I was only 6 years old, so it's kind of an amazing run. You know, you buy in on the concept that there is zoning. So let's say it's like HOA, homeowners, and so if you buy into a property in Florida, you're not expecting them to build a skyscraper in the middle. It's a golf course, and so you're expecting to have your house on the golf course. Now, I didn't get that, but we have a residential neighborhood. We're expecting houses to be kind of like the cookie cutter little colonial house and so forth. And I'm not expecting, say, you know, I don't know, not that there's anything wrong with it, but a methadone clinic next door. I'm not expecting to have, you know, somebody with a you know, kind of like a machine shop next door. I'm not expecting a gas station next door. I'm not expecting 30-story building next door, because I bought in under an assumption, and I'm paying premium housing residential rate for that, you know, HOA, that compact, what I call a covenant or an agreement, whatever you want to call it. And it seems to me that's a little bit, what's the word? It's peremptory, but it seems a little bit capricious that, you know, you can kind of have the rug pulled out from under you. All of a sudden, the zoning might change, and that, for my taste, should be part of the HOA. We're all part of the homeowners. It should be some legislative aspect that we, you know, can vote and agree on. And if we all want to change the vote, you know, the zoning, get rid of it, turn it to Tokyo, which has been able to grow on basically no zoning proposition. So it can be done, you know. But if we want to do that, I think it has to be us doing that. We have to be the ones doing it, rather than having it motivated by politicians who might be able to get their own kind of little shading of some of the you know, juice that goes into this kind of progress.
Yeah, I think, well, you brought up the T, and one aspect of this whole proposition was this transit-oriented development. And great if you can provide the transit orientation, the actual functioning transit system
Functioning.
to support that concept.
Right.
So, you know, if it's a 3-legged stool, housing, transportation, community, and you don't have the transportation in order to support that proposition of you know, getting from where you live to wherever you need to go.
Right.
And then there was
We don't have that quite
here.
here. I grew up in New York City, and I was just in London 3 days ago, and they're similar in the sense that there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of transit. There's a lot of layering of buses and trains and this and that. We have a radial system here. We have basically a center and a spoke system. And if, you know, I've had my teeth cleaned from time to time, and one of my hygienists, you know, she comes to Newton, but she lives in, I'm going to say Sharon or something like that. And there's no train. There's no train. She drives, and that's what you have to do. You know, that is progress, and that's part of the economic system. Most of the people I know, you know, my doctor friend, he lives here. He works in Norwood. You know, that's not a train route. That's not a bus route. And you know, if people are nimble and they're mobile with their cars. And I think this is a little bit short-sighted. People are trying to kind of shoehorn you into this concept where you should be on your bicycle all the time. When you're not on your bike, you should be taking the train, and get rid of those cars. We don't want them. And we live in a place where it's cold, where it's nice to have a car, not a bicycle at this time of year. It's kind of icy, kind of dark, all that kind of stuff. How do we get to a place where we might be, say, in my son's libertarian conception, a little bit more like Tokyo, where, say, the marketplace dictates this, but we don't get these kind of overweening rules from our elected but somewhat, you know, free-floating leaders.
Yeah, I tend to avoid those comparisons
Mm-hmm.
merely because it's really apples and oranges, or even more apples
More
and
different from
cabbages.
that, right?
Yeah. So I am more of a contextualist and looking, looking at what we've got to deal with, how it works, how it doesn't work, how you integrate something you want to achieve into the fabric.
Right.
And
So is that done on more of a case-by-case basis for a certain project, or are you thinking for the city or
well,
the state?
it works
Well,
that way.
How does it
I
work?
mean, it works that way for me personally in my practice with mostly renovating, adding to restoration of older homes. I don't do tear downs. But the design process is exactly the same in its steps if you're taking on a village or a district or an area. In order, it's a problem-solving process that I learned, in the first few years. You apply that very deliberate, careful, contextual process to whatever problem you're taking on. And we have a lot of wishful thinking and I guess great ideas. Wish it could be so, but you've got to back it up with real data. You've got to back it up with a real plan.
So where should some of our city councilors go for better data? And what do you think, given, just try to be topical and timely, what do you think of the recent election and the slight change in city councilors? And are there things for them to learn? And how can they, say, gain from your knowledge, and where would they hunt?
Sure. Well, I don't know if they will gain from my knowledge. I'm just one professional in the community. But I believe folks may have seen Mark Hirschman, and we did presentations on the zoning, frankly, just to inform people what it is that the city was up to, because their process didn't really illustrate and inform very well, partly because they didn't do the actual planning work with the community involved in order to do that. They had the big idea, and they had an agenda, and in
Well,
fact,
that gets back to the Mencken quote. We have this democracy thing, and then we tend to get bludgeoned a little bit by the results.
Yeah.
So we have kind of our weapon back, which is our voting lever now and then. We had this override, and we turned away most of it. I dare say that there's going to be another attempt at an override, even though if they somehow found under the pillow or between the crevices of the couch or whatever another $14 million or whatever. I wish I could do that, because I've been looking through my house and I've not been able to find it. Maybe somebody's buried something, I don't know. I don't know, on a general concept, I mean, that's more of a taxpayer thing, but how does that parlay into I think the need? I think some of the hunger is to keep the salaries going, and they need to have more houses here so they can tax more. I mean, is that a valid point, you think?
it might be. It's not spoken about.
I just did.
Well, you speak about it, but our city leadership doesn't. And I think there's maybe something to that. They did, Newton has permitted close to 3,000 housing units before MBTA Communities Act became into effect, which, by the way, none of those units were counted towards the MBTA Community Act. They weren't allowed to for unknown reasons.
Right. So I have one little side point about the MBTA Communities. What's the name of it actually? Communities Act.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I mapped this out. I actually put it on Facebook, and I can find it for anybody who contacts me through our fine organization here, Newton Taxpayers. But there's certain areas along the T that got this upzoning, and they're going to plan to make these communities. But I noticed that Chestnut Hill mysteriously did not. And I also noticed that our mayor lives in Chestnut Hill. I was kind of, I think this is probably just a coincidence, but I think there was another area, was it Auburndale or something like that, which did not get this, super extra strength pill of having to have housing, at local zoning taken away and having these thrusts put upon it. Do you have any concept of this?
Yeah, there's obviously there are always. Well, Chestnut Hill is primarily a historic district. A large portion of it is.
Including the mall.
Is that true?
No, I'm just throwing that. No, I was being facetious.
So that it didn't seem like it was worth including. I guess I don't know.
Well, there's a big area of the mall there.
Yeah.
And that Webster Woods we just purchased, despite not having any money, and then needing an override. So there's a lot of land there theoretically. Not all is historic, and certainly they could take the mall, have this level, and have the mall be that level. They just want to use the mall land. But we're kind of rounding out our half hour, and I'm going to like to cede the floor or the table, chair, any of these to you to give us your words of wisdom and observations from your tenure as architect and/or Newton resident.
Well, I'm hoping that with the new composition of the City Council, with the new composition of the Zoning and Planning Committee, and a couple of others, that there will be a more thoughtful and less ideological practices at City Hall. Perhaps at some point we'll have the opportunity to have a new mayor as well, but I think there's reason to have some hope that things can be revisited with greater attention to detail and to the actual context of our Newton villages, and to support those villages in the best way possible.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it takes a village, and they're planning on taking a village, or two, or six. So thank you so much, Robert. I've learned a lot from your being here today, and I'm very grateful for your coming on, and love to have you again sometime. For my own, perhaps semi-strident view of things, I think it's important that you out there understand your right as a voter to say no to things. The Romans had their thumbs up and thumbs down, and our betters, oftentimes our leaders, they forget who put them there and why they're there, and things tend to turn into their own little bit of functionary game. We saw this a lot during COVID on a national scale, where the ideas and concepts got away from actual treating a virus and turned into all kinds of social engineering, the Great Reset, changing the way we do schooling and all this kind of stuff. And I think there are people have this concept where they want to fix things, and some of us don't necessarily want to be fixed. And if we do want to fix things, we want to get Robert to come and do it for us, so they can fix our own houses. I think people should work on their own houses, their own sensibilities, their own kids, and all that kind of stuff. And to that end, please join us, the Newton Taxpayers Association. We're on Facebook. We have 2 separate pages for some reason. Find us there, send us a note, and try to enlist and help and keep our city responsible, because that's going to make a better city, better villages, and so forth. If we don't have responsible people, we don't have a great city, and we have a great city thanks to you.